Hello, I'm Dan Dyck. For the month of August, Tales from the Mennonite Heritage Archives is in summer rewind mode. You're invited to re-enjoy a few of our more popular episodes while we work on new stories for you beginning in September. Hello and welcome to Tales from the Archives. My name is Dan Dyck, bringing you stories about fascinating people, places, and events from the Mennonite Heritage Archives. Today I have a guest with me here in the studio. Ralph Friesen is the author of a new book about his hometown of Steinbach, Manitoba. It's entitled Prosperity Ever, Depression Never, and looks how Steinbach grew and progressed during the Great Depression of the 1930s. Ralph was born in Steinbach, the youngest of 6 children. His father was a minister and a bookstore owner, and his mother a quilter known for her stories and laughter. Welcome to Tales from the Archives, Ralph.
Thank you, Dan. It's good to be here.
Ralph, for listeners who may have missed the book's title in the preamble, it's called Prosperity Ever, Depression Never. Where does that title come from?
I struggled a bit with this title, partly because of how optimistic it sounds and how boosterist it might be sounding, because there are shadow sides to this story as well. It actually comes from a Steinbach Post correspondent, and I drew many of my stories from this same writer. That's Gerhard G. Cornelsen, who was first a teacher and then a Watkins salesman during the Depression years. And so he gathered stories and also, of course, recorded stories within Steinbach. And he declared this at some point. I can't recall the exact date, but before the mid-30s, saying this is now our motto, because we are not afraid, we're marching into the future.
There are other history books about Steinbach. How is this one different from the others?
It focuses on this one era, on the Depression years. And, if you set out to write a history of a village or a town, you have all kinds of choices. And I had written history of the first 50 years already. This is a kind of a sequel. If I go at this rate, I'll have to write several more books to get to some reasonable facsimile of the present. But, I chose this because it is remarkable what happened during exactly that time. And also I chose it because it was the time that my parents were newlyweds, raising children, and I was interested in, I would say, recreating the world in which they lived.
You've done a lot of research and writing on Mennonite history, particularly your family's history and your hometown of Steinbach. You've described your interest in history as a search for your own identity. Can you say a little bit more about that?
Well, see, you caught me right away. All of this is really about me. In school, I wasn't a history student. In university, I didn't study history. But what I was somewhat possessed with, maybe at the point where after my dad died, my mom gave me his diaries, and I started to read them, and I thought, this needs to be public somehow. I'm seeing a life that I didn't know about, the life that gave me my life. That's sort of how I got interested in it, and that's really still my main interest. Like, I wouldn't be writing a history of some part of Czechoslovakia.
The Great Depression of the 1930s is typically characterized as a time of great hardship for many people, a time when years of long drought ravaged crops and farms. That's the story of my own grandparents. Jobs and food were scarce. What sets Steinbach apart from this picture of the Depression?
It wasn't entirely apart, and I may be, even with the title, giving somewhat of the wrong impression. Steinbach did suffer during the Depression. There was, in fact, unemployment. I went through the 1931 census, and there were people declaring they had no job. But they still, I don't think there was any big drought happening in that area all during that time. So unlike Saskatchewan, for example. So they mainly escaped that. And they functioned well because they were forced to diversify in their environment. They couldn't just be grain farmers. So, and of course, Steinbach's economy was dependent on the surrounding farm communities. So they raised pigs, they raised chickens, they had large gardens, a dairy industry sort of developed. So many of the people had a subsistence living, even in town, like even from their gardens, and a lot of people had a cow. So if you didn't have an income, you could still live. So that was part of it. Optimism, I think, also was part of the spirit of the place, especially as time went on during the Depression.
I loved how your words brought to life the people of Depression-era Steinbach. The hard times didn't seem to deter the great interest in aviation that developed in Steinbach during the 30s. I read about a parachutist trying to set a record and even a hot air balloon explosion. So many of the characters you write about depict a sturdy, can-do attitude among the townspeople. Where do you think that tenacity of spirit came from?
Like, that's mystifying. How did they, it's almost arrogance. Where did they get the idea that they could keep on doing things when obviously you can't do things and the whole country is depressed and personally should also be depressed? But no, I would hesitate a little, but I think it is something of a Mennonite characteristic to say there is a way forward, and we're practical people. We know how to work with our hands. We can do something. We are not at a total loss, even if in dire circumstances. So there was that, and I think Steinbach just happened to have a group of individual families that had maybe some extra can-do attitude as well.
Many Steinbach residents of the 1930s seemed very open to social change and influences from outside their close-knit community, to the lament of traditional church leaders in some cases. Some pursued academic degrees at universities, and the younger generation brought live theater performances and choirs, and a brass band were formed. How did these activities contribute to their sense of progress and prosperity?
Our association with progress, and even with prosperity, is with innovation. Like, those things seem in our minds connected, and I guess they did in theirs as well. That runs counter to the traditionalist view that innovation is dangerous and we maybe should, except if it's invention of some kind of machinery or new farming methods, then that might be okay. But innovation in terms of the arts or education, not so much. But yeah, I think that all of those things went along with how does progress happen? How does prosperity happen? You have to open up into new possibilities, even if not all of them are pragmatic, like a brass band. But yeah.
In the patriarchal Mennonite community of that era, women were traditionally the carers of children, chickens, and gardens. But some Steinbach women challenged tradition by opening businesses, such as Agnes Taves and her hair salon, which in itself suggests an affordable luxury for that time. What were some of the other women entrepreneurs doing that contributed to the local economy?
Yeah, I mean, good point. Like, to have a hair salon in itself, why would that even be necessary when everybody took care of their own hair at home with the help of the sisters and daughters and mothers? So Agnes, like just the fact that she thought, okay, I can do this, and that there in the 30s that there would be a clientele is remarkable in itself, and evidently there must have been. So she was stepping out into new territory. And then one of my favorites is Mrs. Stark, who was a seamstress, but she operated out of the hotel. So that's a little bit of a different environment for what she was doing. I say one of my favorites because she was a good friend to my mother. So, like, some of these people are alive to me in some way. I did know Mrs. Stark, a very friendly and happy lady. I would say also the woman my mother called the Schreidasche, her name was Katharina Schellenberg, and she was married to a Reimer, so she had all these last names, but let's call her Katharina. Her daring in selling Avon products, including makeup, was I was pretty impressed to read that. I thought, who is buying this stuff? I mean, there was not all clientele were Mennonite. There were Lutherans, There were Lutheran Germans and there were Ukrainians in and around the community and surrounding French communities. So that'd be interesting too. Did they come to Katarina and buy Avon products?
Where progress and development are concerned, there are almost always some tensions. What were some of the conflicts that arose with this innovation and progress, and in what ways did those tensions affect Steinbach's progress in the 1930s?
Well, let's say the skating rink. A skating rink was opened by the sports club, and you can tell just reading by the articles about it that quite a few parents were opposed to it. They were afraid of the worldly influence that their children would come under, going there, skating hand in hand. On the one hand, you have the young people and the children who would welcome this. This is great. They loved it. Here's something that they, both a social activity and a physical athletic activity that they really liked. And parents who were cautious. There was a fear in general, I would say, among many people in the church, but not just, but also ordinary folks, of getting too much involved with the world and losing your focus as a sincere Christian.
Do you have a favorite story or character in the book?
There are stories that spoke to me. I came across this one in Glenn Kaler's memoirs. So he describes, as a young boy, watching Frank Reimer at work. And Frank Reimer was the son of the village butcher, but a young man at this time. And Reimer was a peripatetic worker. So he goes into the shed to slaughter an animal, and he skins it, and he cuts it up, and he does all this on his own, and he doesn't want help. And then there are other stories about Frank. This is actually so-called carload Frank. His business later became Reimer Express, an international transport company. His brother-in-law, A.D. Penner, describes Frank as rising at 5 a.m., loading his truck with goods all by himself, driving to Winnipeg, selling it, loading other stuff on, driving back at night, unloading it all by himself. I don't know if I would call that a favorite story, but it just struck me as this is the extreme Steinbacher. He does everything on his own, and he works tremendously hard. And yes, there's a success that comes with that.
In a way, a book like this is testament to the significance of one's formative years growing up. And we retain those memories and how they play back to us later in life and still have that weight.
I had, in the audience in Steinbach, there were a number of people who themselves were born, say, even in the early 30s, and they know the place that I'm talking about. It existed for them. There are a lot of pictures in the book, so that comes through. So that is what they're familiar with. It was there.
Thank you so much for coming into the studio, Ralph. Prosperity ever, depression never. The book can be purchased from the Mennonite Heritage Archives. Any future projects that are percolating in your mind?
Actually, I do have an article for Preservings magazine in my head about how the piano first came to the EMC Church in Steinbach.
Looking forward to reading that.
There's the whole story. Yeah, Dan, it's been a pleasure. I've really enjoyed our chat, and thanks for having me.
It's delightful to chat with you as well. Many of the images in Ralph Friesen's book are in collections at the Mennonite Heritage Archives, and if you'd like to learn more, visit the Mennonite Heritage Archives at mharchives.ca. And now a brief word from archivist Conrad Stace.
Thanks for listening to Tales from the Archives. I'm Conrad Stace, and I'm the archivist at the Mennonite Heritage Archives. Thanks to our partners, Canadian Mennonite University, Centre for Transnational Mennonite Studies, and Mennonite Church Canada. This program is made possible through the support of Golden West Radio and listeners like you. If you want to support the program and the work of the archives, you can find out how to do that on our website at www.mharchives.ca and click on Support.
Kaylee Dyck and Conrad Stace help out with each and every episodes of Tales from the Archives. Thanks to you both. I'm your host, Dan Dyck. Thank you for listening, and tune in again next week for more stories about people, places, and events from the Mennonite Heritage Archives.